The second the champagne bottle burst open and sprayed all over the wall-mounted flat screen in the break room, I already knew there would be no payment coming my way. Not in cash, not in recognition, not even in the simplest form of respect. The system I had created, line by line, through countless sleepless nights, had just hit 400% above the expected traffic. Live usage stats streamed across the screen like fireworks. The API was running with perfect uptime. Dashboards were smooth and fast. Cross-department data reports were running so clean it sounded like a Tesla coil in motion. The product wasn't just working. It was alive, sharp, reliable, and solid. None of that happened by accident. It was because of me. Everyone clapped. The marketing team snapped victory selfies. The sales department handed out those cheesy foil balloons that have a little #GOAT printed on them. I stood a little away from the crowd, drinking a flat La Croix, watching them parade my work around like it was some cheap party trick for the company. I wasn't angry, not at that moment, just drained. Then the manager walked in with his budget haircut that never cost more than $9 and that usual smug smile. He gave my shoulder a few pats, the way someone would pat a dog that behaved well in front of guests. "Hey, quick thing," he said, pretending it was something small. He said, "Your bonus isn't going to make it through this cycle. Some policy issue, you understand." I stared at him. "Policy?" He shrugged. "Yeah, upper management is tightening rules on post-launch bonuses." He added, already turning his back as if the conversation was over. "Nothing personal. Not personal at all." As if the weekends I spent babysitting broken databases weren't personal. As if the clause I fought to include in the licensing contract, Section 13. 2, subsection D, the one about third-party retention rights, wasn't personal. As if the caffeine and blood I poured into this project wasn't personal. I didn't argue, I didn't shout. I didn't go full Jerry Maguire and hurl the office printer off the counter. I simply nodded once and said, "All right." But here's what I actually understood in that moment. They believed I could be swapped out like a part. They believed the person who rebuilt their entire data infrastructure from the wreckage of a contractor's sloppy, half-done mess was just another expense to trim. That this so-called policy was a reasonable way to disrespect the very person who negotiated legal usage terms with the analytics vendor that the whole company depended on. They assumed I wouldn't notice the quick wince on Don's face when he delivered the line. They were sure I would keep showing up, smiling, acting like another gear in the machine that I was the one who constructed. I prefer this response. I headed back to my desk. The noise in the room faded, like someone had lowered the treble on reality itself. My inbox was stacked with messages, congratulations, quick favors, people asking, "Can you jump on a short call?" Everyone wanted something from me. Data, charts, proof that the system was genuine and not just a flashy illusion. I delivered everything they asked for. No attitude, no hesitation, but something in me shifted. It wasn't anger and it wasn't revenge, not yet. It was more like a cold, steady clarity. They were running a platform whose legal permission to operate depended on a single sentence in a contract that no one except me ever bothered to read. And that sentence included one requirement: my continued employment. So when Don gave me that pathetic brush-off and walked away like I should be grateful to still access the building, he didn't just deny me a bonus. He pulled the pin on the grenade I had built into their beloved system from day one. Now all I needed to do was step back and let gravity finish the work. I didn't say a word to anyone. I didn't go to HR. I didn't message anyone in legal. I opened my encrypted folder, located the PDF, highlighted the clause, and stared at it for a while. I remembered the negotiation with the vendor, remembered how much I had to push to include that line. I wasn't even the one who was supposed to handle the negotiation. Don let it fall apart, obviously, and I stepped in. I spent 2 weeks juggling red lines and vendor side legal teams just to safeguard myself for exactly this scenario. For the day they'd try to cheat me, I returned to my inbox, sent 3 urgent reports, replied to a few product team tech questions, and booked a meeting for Monday. I smiled at people, waved at the intern, even laughed at a joke I didn't hear. After that, I opened a new email, addressed it to the legal team, and typed 4 simple words in the subject line. FYI, potential issue. Monday morning arrived with the smell of old donuts and avoidance. The confetti from Friday's celebration hadn't even been fully vacuumed out of the hallway carpets when the braggy email blast started. Subject lines like incredible teamwork and historic win for the org filled everyone's inbox like cheap corporate fireworks, and in every single one, you could see the same greasy fingerprints, senior leadership congratulating themselves for the work I built. Around 10:06 a.m., the official postmortem was released. A polished PDF filled with charts that I designed, wrapped in branding I customized, and built on date, pulled from the backbone of the system I created. There was a 2-page architecture summary, written like it was some archaeological find discovered in a field instead of something I spent 2 years building through unpaid weekends and personal burnout. And my name wasn't anywhere, not one mention. The author's product lead, VP of Ops, and Don. Yes, the same Don who once asked me if Python was the snake one. Had signed off on a technical report using sentences I wrote word for word in Slack 6 weeks ago. My name wasn't erased, it was reduced to vague references like cross-functional input. I wasn't a human being, I was a bullet point. I didn't react, no petty emoji responses, no just looping myself in here. Instead, I created a new local folder and labeled it with one word: insurance. Into it, I began moving files, Slack conversations, drafts, past versions, design documents, architecture diagrams with timestamps, not out of anger, out of preparation. Big conflicts don't start with explosions. They start with someone sharpening their blade quietly. By midday, the first whispers began. One of the DevOps guys casually asked if legal had actually approved the final vendor clauses before launch. There's some weird wording in Appendix D, he said, drinking from a mug that read World's Okayest Engineer. I kept my eyes on my monitor, sorting post-launch cache reports. A project manager shrugged and said, legal must have skimmed it. If there was a problem, we'd know by now. I almost smiled. The same kind of smile a magician gives right before the audience realizes the rabbit is chewing through his sleeve. I took lunch late, around 1:45, after the break room emptied. There was still leftover cake, a dry chocolate sheet cake with frosting that had crusted into something like wall putty. Someone had written success across the top in red icing. The letter U looked like a toddler drew it mid-tantrum. Fitting. I sat by the window. I wasn't hungry. I was just watching. HR strolled past laughing with someone from sales. Product was already talking about Q4 targets like we hadn't just crawled through a disaster. Don strutted by holding his coffee, talking loudly through his Bluetooth headset about centralizing insights. He didn't look at me. He wouldn't. I wasn't meant to exist outside the code. Yet that afternoon, I opened the license document again, not just the clause from last week. The whole file, every page, every signature, every timestamp. I knew exactly what would happen if I dropped this issue, not just a breach of contract. We were talking full platform shutdown, the kind of problem investors demand emergency calls over, the kind compliance teams label as irreversible exposure. I didn't need to act yet. I only needed to wait, let the quiet linger, let Don forget the details he skimmed, let leadership shine their shoes on my back just a bit longer, let the rope tighten. Because the moment they made my exclusion official, the moment the work became unpaid, uncredited, and wiped clean of my name, that clause would snap into action like a tripwire. I left the office at 6, not a minute early or late, same as any normal day. But this time, I walked out with a hard drive in my bag, encrypted, time-stamped, holding a full backup of the core infrastructure dependencies, because when their precious system goes down, they'll need a miracle. And I already knew I wouldn't be anywhere near the office when they start begging for one. The license sat in a folder everybody had forgotten existed, including procurement. I'd named it with one of those dull file titles that practically tells people to ignore it, unless they actually understand contract versioning. ANC 34 License Final Executed V7. PDF? It had been sitting untouched since the day I signed it, resting in a digital drawer like a loaded weapon no one believed I would ever use. But I remembered it. I remembered every sentence of it. It had been a Wednesday. Everyone was hopped up on caffeine and self-congratulation from the launch. Don had started referring to the system as our baby. In meetings, using this odd fatherly tone, like he had done more than glance at 5 Slack messages and attend one lunch where he asked me to explain what a data warehouse actually is. They were already discussing rolling the system out to more departments, maybe even turning the analytics into a paid product. A whole roadmap was taking shape, built fully on the framework I had engineered, and they still hadn't paid me. So I opened the document. The clause was exactly where I knew it would be. Appendix D, subsection 3, paragraph B. One single sentence, a legal needle hidden within a pile of whereas, therefore, and other contract padding. If the designated technical lead, as defined in Addendum B meaning me, is removed from paid employment for more than 72 hours, the license becomes null and void. All access rights end instantly with no additional notice. No wiggle room, no loopholes, a clean, direct kill switch. That clause wasn't there by luck. I put it there out of pure self-defense. 2 years earlier, Don and his circle had tried to hand the analytics rebuild to a contractor in Austin. Some guy who bragged about being a 10x engineer and treated documentation like it was beneath him. I discovered the Slack conversation by accident. They were preparing to replace me completely, said I was too attached to the system, too opinionated, and that my salary wasn't cost-effective. So I contacted the vendor myself, laid out the situation, told them we needed sharper language, had them insert my name directly into the agreement. If the company wanted to use the software, they had to keep me paid. Not just employed, paid. I wanted to guarantee they would never erase me quietly and get away with it. And now the whole organization was standing on a legal landmine with all their weight on it. I minimized the document, took a sip of my coffee, and opened Outlook. Then I started drafting a new email addressed to internal legal counsel. No theatrics, no warning shots, just 4 plain lines. Subject, FYI, potential issue. Hi Rebecca, looping you in on the analytics license, specifically Appendix D. There may be compliance implications if the current compensation setup is not aligned. Attaching for your review, I attached the contract, original PDF with signatures and timestamps. Let the document do the talking. Then I pressed send, nothing flashy, no alarms, but the moment that paper airplane icon flew off, the entire board shifted. This was no longer about feelings. It was not about fairness or credit. It was about law. It was about governance. It was about how quickly a company can unravel when the only person who actually read the contract stops, shielding them from their own laziness. I did not sit there waiting for a read receipt. I did not keep refreshing for a reply. I leaned back, rolled my neck, and listened to the steady hum of the servers my code still fed. They could continue pretending I did not matter. But now every cycle the system ran was technically out of bounds, and I was the only one who could bring it back into compliance. The first signal was the quiet, not normal quiet, targeted quiet, the kind that moves in clusters, the kind that is deliberate. Legal reached out to Dawn on Thursday morning. I know because Rebecca, our lead counsel, CC'd me. It was a tidy, polite note asking for clarity on the analytics licensing terms. Following up on Appendix D, she wrote, with the cool precision of a surgeon lifting a scalpel. Dawn did not answer, not at first, not even after she followed with, just want to confirm current compensation alignment to ensure license compliance. He let it sit unopened for 6 hours. I watched Dawn's Slack status flip back and forth between active and in a meeting, his little green dot blinking like a pulse. Then something interesting happened. I was suddenly removed from the data ops Slack channel. No heads up, no message, nothing. One moment I was reading a thread about adding new endpoints, and the next I was staring at a notification saying I no longer had access to the workspace. like I'd just been voted off the island. The morning stand-up invite disappeared too. It simply vanished from my calendar. I only realized it when a screen share notification from the Zoom room I should have been in flashed and then faded. They were shutting me out. Don probably thought he was being tactical. Control the damage, limit what I could see. Start rearranging things quietly without dealing with a direct confrontation. Maybe he assumed that if he cut off my access, I'd eventually quit, slip away silently, and become another forgotten file in HR digital basement. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet and named it Critical Dependencies Analytics V3, 6. I began cataloging everything. The daily sales dashboards that my data pipeline fed. The customer churn reports the board relied on. My Python scripts. The ill-timed ops monitors. The runs through my CFGA streams. The forecasting tools the CFO used for quarterly calls, all pulled from models I deployed. Warehouse transformations triggered by cron jobs I wrote during that blizzard last February while Dawn worked from home on flaky Wi-Fi. By lunch, I had listed 43 systems tied to my codebase. By the end of the day, it was 68. By midnight, it was 92. Every item got its own row, a short description, a timestamp, an owner, the condition that would cause it to fail. I added one last column, breakpoint without license. Spoiler alert. Most of those systems would fail within 72 hours if a vendor audit happened. Don's stunt wasn't only arrogant. It was suicidal, and still no answer from him. No reply to legal, no correction of course, just silence and quiet exclusion. They were wagering I would go away quietly, that I had no receipts, that I lacked the appetite, the reach, or the legal cover to flip the switch. What they failed to grasp was that I had built the switch. I had run the wiring. I had written the clause. No yelling required. No dramatic march into a boardroom with a file and a vendetta. All I needed to do was wait. So Friday morning I spent exporting backup logs, mapping dependencies, and encrypting everything with a secure key stored on an offline drive. I did not want revenge. I wanted proof. If they showed up groveling, I wanted the ability to say no. If they attacked, I wanted to be able to dismantle them with 3 clicks. The fire had not yet hit them, but the smoke was starting to creep through the vents. There was no meeting on anyone's calendar. No subject line, no prep doc, no Slack blitz. Just a series of discreet summonses from legal. Rebecca was gathering a short list of people into conference room C, like she was assembling a jury before sentencing. Inside, Dawn sat red-faced and bored. Someone from HR chewed gum like they were at a high school pep rally. A finance analyst, fresh out of grad school and visibly wishing he were anywhere else, sat stiffly in his chair. Rebecca took the seat at the head of the table, laptop open, hands pressed together as if she were either praying or preparing to deliver a verdict. I wasn't invited to the meeting, of course, but I didn't need to be. I already knew what document she had open on her screen. Appendix D, the clause, the noose. Rebecca had been digging. The kind of digging only sharp lawyers with restless minds and too little sleep bother to do. She didn't skim the contract, she read it. She understood what Don hadn't, that the license wasn't a box to tick. It was a live contract, a heartbeat agreement, and I was the heart. Rebecca began with a steady voice. I need to confirm something, she said, speaking with the calm focus of someone handling an explosive wire. Is she currently being compensated in accordance with her employment agreement? HR jumped in quickly, eager to answer what they assumed was an easy question. Yes, of course, she's still an active employee. There's been no termination. Rebecca didn't move. That wasn't what I asked. Is she being paid? Silence. Finance scrolled through a spreadsheet, brow furrowing. Her Q2 performance bonus is still under review. I'm not seeing a disbursement yet. The finance analyst said, squinting at the sheet. Don rushed in too quickly, too eagerly. We're still reviewing the performance metrics tied to the rollout. I mean, the team did great, of course, but there are some policy-level guidelines around post-launch incentive triggers that Rebecca raised a hand. A slow, precise gesture. Then she closed her laptop, not with force, not with attitude, just a quiet, final shut, like sealing a coffin. She looked around the room, really looked, and said, "If she hasn't been paid, we're in breach." HR blinked. "Breach of what?" Rebecca pointed to the closed laptop. Clause 13. 2. Subsection D. The license agreement that gives us legal permission to operate 97% of our analytics infrastructure. The clause requiring her to remain in paid employment for the license to stay valid. Dawn let out a weak laugh. That's just boilerplate. No, Rebecca said, soft enough that the temperature in the room seemed to drop. It isn't. Everything went still. Rebecca leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. If this isn't corrected, we're out of compliance, which means our use of the system is illegal, which means every dashboard, every report, every investor briefing based on that data becomes liability, which means she looked at Dawn, will need to explain why you ignored a compensation clause. That includes an operational kill switch. Dawn looked like someone only now realizing the parachute he packed was actually a duffel bag. "I didn't know," he muttered. "You were informed," Rebecca replied. "You signed the disbursement delay form. You approved the bonus freeze." The finance analyst cleared his throat. "We thought it was standard. No one told us." Rebecca cut him off. "It's not standard. It's negligent." Silence followed. Dense and unforgiving. Then Rebecca stood. "I'm taking this to the CEO," she said. "If she isn't paid by the end of today, we enter breach. If that happens, I'll have to notify our external counsel and the vendor's compliance division." She walked to the door, paused, and without turning added, "And if you think she's bluffing, you should read the rest of the contract." She had written most of that contract herself. Through the glass wall, someone from IT walked by carrying a monitor that kept flickering on and off. Outside the meeting room, the office carried on like any normal day. But inside that room, the fire had already landed. They just hadn't noticed yet that it was burning straight through the floor beneath them. The first hit came from a missed email, 3:12 a.m. The automated global sales reconciliation report never reached the CFO inbox. No bounce. Back, no error log, just silence. At 3:34, an intern on the East Coast shift messaged IT with the kind of naive panic only interns can deliver. "Hey, are the dashboards down or is this just me being dumb?" By 4:00 a.m., the DevOps chat looked like a battlefield. No one could access the analytics cluster. Container logs were clean, no overnight deployments, no infra issues. Yet every API key was returning 403 errors from the vendor side. Then the notification hit. Not from me, not from legal, from the system itself. Across every executive dashboard, every board report, every investor metric, churn map, and CLV forecast, one red banner appeared, license unrecognized. Contact account holder, that was the clause, the exact sentence in Appendix D raising a middle finger at all of them, because they hadn't paid me. By 6:45 a.m., Don's voicemail was full, his email too. Probably his soul as well. People began gathering around his office like kids staring at a burning house. I watched everything unfold from the break room, feet up, drinking burnt office coffee from a chipped mug that read "Day to Never Sleeps." The irony wasn't lost on me. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even smiling. I was just there, still, quiet, like a ghost watching the machine collapse from the inside. By 7:30, the issue had reached legal. Legal took it straight to Rebecca. She didn't message me. She didn't need to. At 8:02, she stood outside the CEO office, black binder tucked under her arm. I could see her through the glass, speaking quickly, her voice low, her expression pale but steady. The CEO reaction shifted in stages. Confusion, then concern, then silence. At 8:15, an emergency meeting was called. No Zoom link. No calendar agenda, in person only. The subject line was just one word, urgent. I wasn't invited. Again, didn't matter. My name walked into that room long before I did. Don tried to spin a narrative, of course he did. He called it a technical glitch, a vendor handshake issue. Rebecca slid the contract across the table. She pointed to the clause 13. 2, subsection D. License terminates if the designated technical lead is not being compensated. Silence. The CEO asked, "Is this legitimate?" Rebecca nodded once. "Is she currently being paid?" Finance shook their head. Don attempted to speak, and the CEO shut him down with a hand like swatting away a fly. I stayed in the break room, still sipping the same awful coffee. Someone from marketing cried quietly while eating a granola bar. Then a second alert hit the monitors. Date, the pipeline suspended due to license breach. You could feel the panic spreading through the building because this wasn't a bug, this was compliance. This wasn't just a system outage. This was exposure. Every dashboard, every report, every investor facing projection they had lined up for the quarterly call was now, from a legal standpoint, unusable. They could fire me if they wanted. They just wouldn't be able to run the company afterward. I opened my laptop, hit refresh, and watched their world lock up in real time. Then I finished my coffee. It tasted better than it ever had. The conference room was packed, but nobody seemed able to breathe. Not when Rebecca opened her black binder. Not when she clicked her pen with that sharp little sound that always felt like a warning. Not even when she read the clause aloud, the way a priest recites a final verse at an execution. Appendix D, Clause 13. 2, subsection D, she said, eyes scanning the page but her voice aimed squarely at Dawn. Termination upon the unpaid status of the designated technical lead. The projector stayed off. Blinds closed, no slides, no corporate polish. Just the printed contract and the rising pulse of 5 executives suddenly realizing they had stepped on a legal landmine. Rebecca lifted her head, calm in the way a storm is once it's already destroyed everything in its path. "Please tell me you paid her," she said, her gaze fixed on Don like a knife at his throat. "Name on record, she's employed, she's still active," Don stammered. "She hasn't been terminated." "That's not what I asked," Rebecca said, her voice colder than office furniture veneer. "Has she been paid?" Silence stretched until the junior finance analyst in the corner finally spoke. "Her Q2 bonus was held back. It's still under internal review." Rebecca blinked once, shut the binder with clean precision, then opened it again to a different page. This one highlighted, underlined, notarized. Then she said, steady and flat, "You should call your investors." The room silently imploded. The CFO went pale. The VP of sales rubbed his temples like he was trying to massage the disaster out of his skull. The CEO stared at the document, unmoving, as if expecting it to ignite. Don tried to laugh it off, grasping at denial. "Come on, this is exaggerated legal wording, right? Clauses like this never actually get enforced." "Enforceable," Rebecca said, cutting through him. "The vendor confirmed it. I spoke with their compliance lead this morning. They checked her employment status against their access logs. If she isn't paid, we're operating without a license." Dawn tried again. "There has to be a grace period." "There isn't," she replied, flipping to another page. 72 hours. That window closed last night at 11:43 p.m. Another silence, this one heavier, almost suffocating. Rebecca stood, straightened her blazer, and addressed the CEO, not Don. "My recommendation is immediate retroactive compensation and a prepared disclosure for the board and our investors. This breach impacts operations and every downstream report dependent on that pipeline." The CEO exhaled through his nose, tight and strained. "Is there a fix?" Rebecca didn't answer right away. She looked at him, then said, "You had one. You decided her bonus wasn't worth the policy exception." Don was sweating now. His hand shook as he lifted his water bottle. I didn't know. No one told me the clause was real." "You signed the contract," Rebecca said, already turning to leave, and she highlighted it, twice. That was the moment it sank in for all of them. This wasn't a clerical slip-up. It wasn't an oversight or someone missing an email. It wasn't a misunderstanding at all. This was a system built by someone they assumed they could toss aside, protected by a clause none of them bothered to read because it didn't appear in a neat bullet point slide. Rebecca paused at the door, I'll prepare the disclosure. Tell me if you'd like your names included." Then she left. No drama, no grand gesture. Just the truth settling over them like dust. Inside that room, no one spoke. Outside, the platform stayed offline, dashboards blank. Data vanished. Reality unfiltered, and me. I was down the hall, leaning against the vending machine, watching the shock drain the strength from the very people who believed I didn't matter. No smile, no gloating, just quiet. Let them sit with it. By noon, the entire office had the atmosphere of a funeral parlor. Phones still rang, but no one picked up. Slack channels sat like digital graveyards filled with unanswered questions. The CEO assistant rushed past my desk 3 times in 15 minutes, clutching a laptop and a half-eaten banana, whispering, oh God," like a mantra. The collapse had started. Investor dashboards gone. Customer churn metrics gone. Forecasting tools pulling day. So old it referenced a product that didn't even exist anymore. People were rebooting routers like that could fix anything. Marketing accused IT. IT blamed the vendor. The vendor replied with one ruthless sentence in an email. "Your license is invalid due to breach. Please contact your designated account lead for reinstatement." The account lead was me. I wasn't watching the chaos for entertainment. I was busy polishing a few scripts for a freelance job I had lined up, paid in crypto and respect. Already a better offer than what this place ever gave. Around 12:40 p.m., someone from HR approached, a nervous kid named Tyler, sweat marks under both arms, holding a printed form like it was a ransom letter. Don was wondering if you could maybe help us draft some transition documentation," he said, voice breaking halfway through. I looked at him and blinked once. "You mean documentation for a system I'm no longer legally permitted to access?" I asked. Tyler flushed bright red. "Well, yeah, but just so the team can keep things running." I took a slow sip of my tea and said, steady and clear, "Tell Don I'm not available. And next time, don't send someone who doesn't know what the word breach means." He nodded far too quickly, like his head wanted to flee before the rest of him, and backed away without another word. I returned to my terminal and removed my personal credentials from every sandbox environment. Not out of spite, just closure. Meanwhile, HR tried to patch the wound. They attempted to push through a backdated bonus. They didn't even bother hiding it. The payroll edit showed a timestamp of 11:04 a.m., several hours after the clause's deadline had passed. The payment was labeled manual adjustment discretionary. They really believed they could tape a bandage over a bullet hole and call it compliance. Rebecca shut that down fast. She sent a company-wide message to leadership, short, sharp, impossible to argue with. Retroactive payment does not resolve breach status under Contract Clause 13. 2D. Timestamped payroll logs confirm the violation. The platform remains unlicensed. Disclosure to the vendor and investors will proceed. There it was in plain text from legal. No softening, no excuses. And still, Don tried to pin it on internal miscommunication. Later, I heard him in the hallway telling someone from finance that maybe I should have come to him directly instead of involving legal, as if I hadn't already done that. As if I hadn't sent the first message labeled FYI, potential issue. The stupidity wasn't surprising. What actually stunned me was how determined they were to stay stupid. A financial crater was about to hit their quarterly report, and their master plan was to hand me a Word doc template and hope I'd cooperate. But I wasn't playing anymore. I wasn't even on the field at 2 p.m. I walked by the conference room. Inside was chaos. 4 people on a video call, one crying, one pacing. Don waving frantically at a spreadsheet full of #ref errors. I didn't stop. I didn't look inside. I just kept walking and gave a small smile at the vending machine. The Twix was sold out. Still more dependable than their leadership. The call came at 6:42 p.m. I had just poured myself a glass of wine and fed the cat when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. A direct line, no caller ID masking, no assistant screening. That only meant one thing. I answered with one word, yes. A long silence. I could hear him inhale like it hurt. Then, what will it take? No greeting, no small talk. Just sandpaper voice and desperation wearing a suit. It was the CEO. Not his assistant, not PR, not a damage control puppet, him. I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened the folder titled "They're Going to Beg." Inside was a PDF my lawyer and I had prepared 2 weeks before launch, before Don got clever, before HR decided policy mattered more than the person who built their future. Its title, Reinstatement and Buy-out Proposal Effective Upon License Breach. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence pull tight, thin as piano wire. Then I forwarded the document. The subject line was, "Your offer window, 24 hours." The PDF had 3 terms: immediate wire transfer of all unpaid compensation, plus a 40% breach penalty, mid-6-figure buy-out of the license clause, processed through external counsel, a written acknowledgement of my contributions to be read aloud at the next all-hands meeting. I heard him open the file. You can always tell when someone sees the number. The air changed, 10 full seconds of nothing. Then, in a low voice, he said, "We should have just paid you the bonus." I didn't say I warned you. I didn't laugh. No victory dance. I simply replied, "You have until end of business tomorrow. After that, the vendor gets the breach escalation." I hung up. No farewell. No drama. I leaned back, took a sip of wine, and waited for the wire confirmation to hit my inbox. The dashboard stayed dark through the night. The board never received their Q3 burn rate report. Investors kept refreshing pages showing error 4002, license authorization required. Meanwhile, I watered my plants, watched the sunset, sat with the kind of silence that feels golden, the kind that arrives when the system you built finally speaks louder than you ever needed to. They hadn't just violated a contract. They'd proven I was the only one keeping the whole operation alive, and now they would pay for it, on my terms. Thanks for sticking through the chaos, fellow workplace warriors. Subscribe if you want more stories where the switch flips and the people who underestimated you start sweating.